The reign of Henry VIII was a time of profound religious and political transformation in England. The break with Rome did not lead to tolerance, but to a new conformism imposed from above. In the meantime, subscribe to the Story of Asuta channel so you don't miss the next videos. Now let's start. Anne Askew, the woman who defied fire, faith, and the king. In an age when religion and power were inextricably intertwined and questioning dogma meant certain death, a young woman dared to challenge both. Her name was Anne Askew. Her destiny, to become an eternal symbol of spiritual resistance and civic courage. In an England torn by the struggles between Catholics and Reformers, Anne was not content with the role that society imposed on women. The corridors of power, the pulpit of faith, the sphere of thought, everything that was denied her, she reclaimed. She did it not with the weapon, but with the word. And that very word led her to torture, to the betrayal of her body, to the pyre, but not to surrender. Anne Askew was born in Lincolnshire in 1521, the daughter of Sir William Askew, a gentleman in the service of the crown. Raised in a cultured and wealthy environment, Anne received a rigorous education, an extremely rare privilege for women of the time. But what made her exceptional was the use she made of that education. She studied the scriptures not just for piety, but to question and interpret. In a context dominated by male control of doctrine, Anne became a self-taught theologian and lay preacher. In her 20s, she married Thomas Kyme, a conservative Catholic. The marriage quickly proved a failure, not only because of personal incompatibility, but also because of irreconcilable ideological differences. Anne rejected her husband's spiritual authority, as well as that of the Roman Church. She was expelled from her home, and rather than return to silence and obedience, she moved to London. There, she began her real public life. London in 1540 was a city in tension, suspended between the traditional authority of Catholicism and the growing influence of Protestantism. Although Henry VIII had broken with Rome, the official doctrine of the state remained substantially Catholic, thanks to the Act of the Six Articles of 1539. In this context, Anne began to openly spread her reformist ideas. Rejection of transubstantiation, direct reading of the Bible, and salvation through faith alone. Her sermons, often held in public and addressed to women, challenged not only theology, but the entire social order. She was a woman who spoke doctrine, and she did so with eloquence, with confidence, with fervor. Religious authorities were quick to respond. Anne was arrested for the first time in 1545, interrogated and released thanks to influential supporters at court. But her notoriety was growing, and with it, fear among defenders of order. Rumors began to circulate. His connections reached as far as Catherine Parr, the last wife of the king, known for her evangelical sympathies. In a climate already marked by suspicions, intrigues, and religious purges, it took little to go from the pulpit to the scaffold. In 1546, Anne was arrested again. This time, the Privy Council didn't just want to punish her, they wanted to use her. They wanted information, names, complicity. They hoped that Anne, under pressure, might reveal a reformist circle within the court, headed, perhaps, by the Queen herself. But Anne was silent. She was then taken to the Tower of London, where something unheard of happened: personal torture by high officials. Thomas Wriothesley, Lord Chancellor, and Sir Richard Rich, both men of the King, took direct part in her torture. They used the wheel, a barbaric method rarely used on women, to break her joints. Her shoulders and hips were dislocated. Her own words, collected by John Bale, tell the horror. They put me on the wheel because I would not confess to any lady or gentlewoman that I was of my opinion, until it completely destroyed the strength in my arms and legs. All this happened after the conviction, not to judge, but to extort collaboration. Anne did not speak, not even under the most extreme pain. On the 16th of July, 1546, Anne was taken to Smithfield, London. She was so weak that they had to carry her in a chair. She could no longer walk. Her bones were broken, her body disjointed, but her will was intact. They condemned her to be burned alive as a heretic. Beside her were 3 men, John Lascelles, John Hadlam, John Hemley. But it was she, the woman, the martyr, the rebel, who caught the attention of the crowd. She was chained to the post with a specially constructed chair to hold her upright. Around her neck, a bag of gunpowder, a mercy granted to make her death quicker, or perhaps to spare her screams. Anne, however, remained silent until the end. Bishop Nicholas Shaxton, a convert to Catholicism, was appointed to preach at the stake. Anne did not even look at him. The fire was lit, and his story became legendary. Anne Askew was the first known woman to be tortured in the Tower of London and then burned at the stake for heresy. But her death was not the end. Her writings, the examinations of Anne Askew, were copied, read, spread. John Foxe made it one of the fulcrums of his acts and emoluments, the work that would fuel English Protestant identity for centuries to come. Anne's figure became an icon, not just a religious one, but a civil one. Her martyrdom showed how far the state was willing to go to control individual conscience, and how much, in response, conscience could resist. Today, Anne Askew is remembered not only as a victim, but as a witness of a violent era, of rare courage, of unshakable faith. Her voice, clear, rational, stubborn, still speaks to us across the centuries. And he asks us a question: how much is a belief worth? How much is a truth worth? How much is the freedom to believe worth? As she herself wrote shortly before the fire, "I would rather die than break my faith." And so she did. She did not bend. She did not betray. And for that very reason, she was never defeated. The story of Anne Askew is not just that of a woman burned alive for heresy. It is the story of a thought that defied authority, of a conscience that resisted torture, of a voice that was never truly silenced. At a time when religion was an instrument of power and faith, a political battleground, Anne stood up, alone, determined, against the entire apparatus of state and church. She did it not with violence, but with words, not with hatred, but with firmness. And that made her dangerous. What was inflicted on her, the humiliation, the torture, the public death, could have erased her from memory. Instead, it made her immortal. Her agony has spanned the centuries as an irrepressible testimony to the strength of the human spirit in the face of the arrogance of power. Today, in our age of freedom of worship and expression, it can be difficult to truly comprehend the price that women like Anne paid for simply speaking out for their own conscience. But that is precisely why his sacrifice deserves to be remembered, because it reminds us that every freedom, even the one we take for granted today, has been earned, defended, suffered. Anne Askew did not seek death, but she was not afraid to face it. She was burned for her ideas, but her ideas never burned. The flames consumed her body, not her voice. Even today, reading her words, we can hear the unaltered sound of her dignity. And perhaps this is her greatest legacy, teaching us that true strength lies not in domination, but in the coherence between what one believes and what one is willing to sacrifice to defend it. In a world that still struggles to reconcile power, faith, and freedom, the figure of Anne Askew stands as a warning and a hope. Because his death was an injustice, but his life was truth. That's all for today. And what do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments. Your opinion helps me support the channel. See you next time. Bye.